Are Chinese goods about to get a lot more expensive? Even the cheap stuff? In a surprise move this week, the White House announced a new amendment targeting low-value imports from the People's Republic of China, tightening tariff rules that have long allowed small packages to enter the U.S. duty-free. If you've ever ordered a $10 gadget from an online marketplace and got free shipping from overseas, this could directly impact you. The change is part of a broader push for tariff reciprocity, a principle that says if the U.S. imposes tariffs on foreign goods, trading partners should do the same, and vice versa. But in this case, the U.S. is closing a loophole that's let Chinese sellers benefit unfairly from an outdated exemption, one that's now being reined in. We'll break it all down, what the amendment says, how it changes the rules, who it affects, and what it means for the future of global trade. If you find this kind of coverage helpful, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. Your support helps us keep creating valuable trade insights every day. The White House amendment, published on whitehouse.gov, outlines a new approach to how the U.S. handles reciprocal tariffs and duties on low-value imports, specifically from China. The policy shift focuses on what's known as the de minimis threshold, a rule that currently allows imports valued under $800 to enter the U.S. without paying duties or taxes, provided they meet certain conditions. Under this amendment, the United States Trade Representative, or USTR, is now directed to review and revise de minimis treatment for packages coming from countries that do not provide reciprocal access to United States exports, and China is at the top of that list. The policy makes it clear, if a country restricts low-value U.S. goods or applies tariffs unfairly, then their own exports shouldn't enjoy duty-free treatment here. The amendment targets massive volumes of small packages, often from Chinese e-commerce platforms, that enter the United States daily, bypassing duties that American sellers are subject to. While the amendment is not a blanket ban, it opens the door for customs enforcement, tariff application, and system reform, especially for imports flagged as non-reciprocal under this new trade framework. To understand the impact of this policy, it's important to define what counts as a low-value import. In the United States, the current de minimis threshold is set at $800. That means any goods valued below this amount can enter the country without paying standard tariffs or duties as long as they're for personal use and meet all customs requirements. This threshold was raised from $200 to $800 in 2016, partly to modernize customs procedures and reduce the administrative burden on border officials, but it also opened the floodgates for direct-to-consumer international shipments, especially from Chinese platforms like Temu, Shein, and AliExpress. These companies often ship thousands of parcels per day, each individually valued below the threshold, thus avoiding tariffs that US-based retailers must pay. Many of these items include clothing, electronics, accessories, and consumer goods, typically priced under $50, and are often shipped directly from overseas warehouses to U.S. doorsteps. This model has made fast, cheap shopping easier for American consumers, but it's also created an unfair playing field and potential gaps in tariff enforcement. With this amendment, the White House is signaling that the era of unchecked low-value importing may be coming to an end, at least from certain countries. At the heart of this amendment is a growing concern over tariff loopholes that benefit foreign sellers, particularly from China, at the expense of American manufacturers and retailers. The de minimis rule, though originally intended to simplify trade and reduce customs congestion, has evolved into a major loophole for global e-commerce giants. Chinese sellers have taken advantage of this by splitting large shipments into smaller parcels, each under $800, to avoid duties. This practice not only undercuts US-based businesses that must pay tariffs on imports, but also allows foreign sellers to price goods more competitively, while bypassing many of the regulatory requirements US companies face. The White House is now calling this out as an issue of reciprocity, a foundational principle in trade. If the U.S. offers tariff-free access to low-value goods, then American goods should receive the same treatment abroad. But China does not offer a comparable de minimis exemption for U.S. exports, creating a one-sided advantage. By revising how low-value imports are treated, the amendment aims to level the playing field and send a message. Reciprocity is no longer optional in trade relations with the U.S. Items like $5 phone chargers, $10 t-shirts, or $20 smartwatches, often shipped directly from China, may now be subject to new duties, depending on how the rules are implemented. This means shipping costs could rise, delivery times may increase due to customs inspections, and some sellers might pass along the added tariff costs to the buyer. But the bigger picture affects American businesses, especially small and mid-sized retailers. For years, they've faced an uphill battle competing with Chinese sellers who don't have to pay import duties or comply with U.S. product standards and taxes in the same way. This amendment gives U.S. businesses hope for a more level playing field where everyone follows the same trade rules. Retail trade associations have long pushed for reforms to the de minimis threshold, not to restrict consumers, but to stop the abuse of the system by high-volume, low-value exporters. If implemented properly, this change could restore some competitive balance in sectors like fashion, electronics, and home goods. By using the de minimis loophole, these platforms avoided not only tariffs, but also complex customs declarations and compliance requirements that traditional importers must navigate. If the White House amendment is enforced strictly, these companies could face higher costs, longer processing times, and reduced competitiveness in the U.S. market. It may force them to restructure their logistics, shift warehousing closer to the U.S. or even raise prices, moves that could erode the very price advantage that made them attractive in the first place. Additionally, some Chinese sellers may struggle to comply with U.S. customs documentation if low-value packages are no longer exempt. That could lead to shipment delays, rejected entries, or legal penalties for inaccurate declarations. The ripple effect could also hit China's economy, where low-value exports to the U.S. generate billions in revenue and employment. If these exports slow down due to new enforcement rules, smaller manufacturers and cross-border sellers could bear the brunt. Ultimately, the amendment could signal the end of an era for ultra-cheap, duty-free Chinese goods flooding the American market. This amendment is not an isolated move. It's part of a broader strategy of economic confrontation between the U.S. and China, particularly in the realm of trade fairness and supply chain security. For years, U.S. policymakers have accused China of engaging in unfair trade practices, including state subsidies, forced technology transfers, and a lack of market access for American businesses. In response, tariffs have become a central tool in the U.S. arsenal dating back to the Trump administration's Section 301 tariffs and continuing under President Trump's second term. Now, by targeting low-value imports, the White House is expanding the battlefield to include not just large industrial goods but also consumer-level trade dynamics. It reflects a shift in focus, cracking down not only on big-ticket imbalances like steel or solar panels, but also on the mass-volume microtransactions that have quietly shaped e-commerce flows. This amendment signals that reciprocity and enforcement will drive U.S. trade policy moving forward. It also aligns with ongoing efforts to decouple critical supply chains, reduce dependency on China, and protect U.S. producers at every level, from major manufacturers to mom-and-pop online shops. Experts argue that the U.S. has been far too lenient with its de minimis policy, especially given how aggressively China controls its own import thresholds. By tightening enforcement, the U.S. is signaling a new phase of reciprocal discipline that could rebalance some of the trade asymmetries plaguing small and mid-sized American companies. However, some economists caution that this could lead to higher costs for consumers, especially those who rely on affordable imports for everyday purchases. There's also concern about the potential for retaliation. China could respond with tighter inspections or tariffs on U.S. goods, further escalating trade tensions. Retail and logistics experts are also watching closely. If the U.S. begins random inspections or imposes duties on millions of small parcels, it could cause delays at ports, increased customs processing times, and pressure on the e-commerce fulfillment system. Still, most agree. The days of unrestricted low-value importing from China may be numbered, and the global supply chain will need to adapt quickly. Now that the amendment has been issued, the next phase involves implementation and enforcement, and that could play out in a number of ways. The United States Trade Representative, or USTR, and U.S. Customs and Border Protection (CBP) are expected to begin reviewing de minimis practices and potentially establish new rules or thresholds for countries that don't offer reciprocal treatment, like China. This could include applying tariffs on low-value imports, demanding more detailed customs declarations, or even restricting certain types of shipments. Congress may also get involved. There's already bipartisan momentum to reform de minimis loopholes, particularly for China, and this amendment gives lawmakers a stronger platform to introduce legislative changes supporting tougher enforcement. Meanwhile, importers, e-commerce platforms, and logistics companies will need to prepare for new compliance burdens. This could mean working with customs brokers, adjusting shipping strategies, or absorbing higher costs. Whether the changes are immediate or phased in, one thing is clear. The rules of global e-commerce are shifting, and both sellers and buyers will need to navigate a more regulated future. This amendment marks a significant turning point in how the United States handles low-value imports, particularly from China. It reflects a broader push for fairness, reciprocity, and enforcement in global trade. We'll continue monitoring how this policy develops and what it means for businesses, consumers, and the future of cross-border commerce. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment with your take on these changes. Sources for this video, including the full White House amendment, are linked in the description.